Session of the conference. Please take your seats. We are three speakers. Mr. Theophylaktos, unfortunately, due to a family affair, he had to leave. And we're now going to address the practical steps in terms of issuance of bonds, market reception, new initiatives, and then round this all up with a broad discussion. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Marina Strovolidou, who is the Head of Certification and Climate Bonds Initiative, based in Nicosia, Cyprus, with whom we also have very good cooperation, and we had a lot of support from her in the undertaking of the issuing of the first green bond in the region, in Cyprus, a small bond, 5 million, for a photovoltaic plant, but I'll tell you about this a little later. So, Marina, you have the floor.
So, good afternoon from me. Thank you, Kostis, for arranging this excellent conference and for inviting us to present Climate Bonds Initiative certification scheme. So, the scene has been set by the previous speakers. I will not dwell too much on it. As you all know, we're not near meeting 1.5 degrees by the end of the century yet. The UN has estimated that we will need investments of about 7 trillion per annum, more likely to be towards 9 trillion, according to McKinsey. And sustainable finance has filled the gap to some extent. But of course, we do need to escalate progress if we are to meet the target. So cumulatively, green bond issuance has exceeded 2 trillion, labeled issuance around $2.5 trillion. But we will not achieve 1.5 unless we actually tackle the high-emitting sectors. So I'd just like to give you an outline of the Climate Bond Standard and our certification scheme. The scheme was actually developed in 2012 together with the taxonomy that Sean and his team at the time developed. It was an innovation at the time because it was the first attempt to actually define what is truly green and climate aligned and Paris aligned. In conjunction to that, we have a process. It is described in the Climate Bond Standard. We have had 3 iterations of the standard. We're currently at version 3 and shortly moving on to version 4, as I will explain later. So the process for issuing a certified bond is aligned with the ICMA Green Bond Principles. So certification guarantees alignment with the principles. And the most important pillar, of course, and what is different to our certification scheme is full alignment with our specific sector criteria, not just the high-level green categories prescribed by ICMA, by the ICMA principles. So the criteria is developed through a rigorous process of convening technical working groups of industry experts. It is discussed in industry working groups. It is launched for public consultation. So it is quite a long, rigorous process before we actually reach the final criteria that we can use for certification. And the whole process of developing criteria and the standard itself, the process is overseen by an independent board. This is the Climate Bond Standards Board, comprising of 7 members who represent the investor community as well as other NGOs. So our certification scheme is voluntary, and it's basically based on, it's a binary assessment, so it's not a grading or a shading scheme. And it's based on a standardized rule set, which is the criteria and the process to be followed. And very importantly, of course, we require an external verification, a positive verification by an approved verifier. In our network of approved verifiers, we have 70 such approved verifiers, one of which is IENE, our only local verifier in Greece. I would also like to say that the projects that can be financed through a certified bond can either be physical projects or financial projects, assets. They could be loans in a loan book. And they can also be used for either financing new developments or acquisitions of new eligible projects, or refinancing existing projects. Refinancing in this context is used more broadly. It does not mean there has to be existing debt to be paid off. It can be refinancing something that was developed through equity or other means. So we have a taxonomy that Sean referred to earlier, and all the projects that we can certify actually have to fall under our taxonomy, and the specific subsectors we have developed criteria for. So the most important sectors for us so far have been the renewable energy sectors, obviously, solar, wind, hydropower, offshore wind, geothermal, and recently, year before last, we actually also launched criteria for electrical grids and any infrastructure investments relating to grids. And as Sean mentioned earlier, any investments in grid infrastructure in Europe are actually eligible according to our criteria. Some sectors also contain adaptation and resilience requirements that also need to be met. So eligibility actually does require both. In Greece, we have only certified one bond, as Mr. Gonis mentioned earlier, the Terna bond we certified in 2019. The scheme is truly global, so we have certifications everywhere from China to Latin America, Europe, the United States. So what will be the benefit of certifying a green bond? So our standard, as I have described, requires a rigorous process, scientifically developed criteria, so we do consider it as best practice in green finance. Of course, there are other best practice frameworks in Europe, as you know, which are partly obligatory. Our standard is, of course, totally voluntary. It offers transparency, visibility to investors. The certification label appears on data platforms such as Refinitiv. So a climate certified bond would actually appear as such in various platforms. As I said, we have a competent network of external reviewers that we oversee, support, and train. And as Sean mentioned earlier, there are many benefits to issuing a green bond. Obviously, certified bonds are a small subset of the green bond market, but they do anecdotally provide higher demand and therefore potential price benefits on issuance to the issuer and to the investor in the secondary market. And very importantly, of course, enhanced reputation benefits for the issuers and companies wishing to become certified under the standard, as I will explain later. So the process for certifying an instrument, as I said, it's an ICMA-aligned process, so you'll recognize the structure of it. Obviously, the issuer needs to have a green finance framework, which sets out the specific standards and guidelines that the bond will follow, the issuer of the bond will follow, whether it's the UN SDGs, the ICMA principles, the climate bond standard, or a taxonomy, another taxonomy. They would need to engage an approved verifier from our network of verifiers, and we require that the verification is conducted in accordance with an international assurance standard, either ISA 3000 or an equivalent standard, and that there is a specific opinion, either a limited assurance opinion or a reasonable assurance opinion. So far we have concentrated, of course, on user process certifications. That's what version 3 can cater for currently. And this involves usually 2 stages of verification, both at pre-issuance, before the bond is issued. The focus of this process would be to establish the eligibility of the projects and the assets and assess the readiness of the issuer to issue a certified bond. And then following issuance of the instrument, within usually 24 months, confirm that the proceeds have been allocated to the eligible projects. And then we require the issuer to report to us and to the investors in the bond on an annual basis at least, confirming that they still comply with the criteria of the standard and with any metrics of the particular sector that the bond has been certified under. I just wanted to touch on this just to say that we have a streamlined process for programmatic issuers. These are regular issuers, and most of our certifications currently actually do come from our regular issuers, where we don't need all the documents required for certification to be submitted every year. We just require information on any new instruments, but then the approved verifier would actually need to be engaged on at least on an annual basis to provide confirmation of the eligibility of anything issued over the prior year. So cumulatively, we have certified about over 270 billion of different types of instruments. We're not limited in the type of instrument we can certify. We can certify bonds, loans, or any other kind of bilateral agreement, securitization bonds, even green deposits or commercial paper. We have certified green repos issued by some banks. And we do not really focus on the collateral aspect of the instrument. We just require a process of making sure that the proceeds are allocated to eligible assets. And certified bonds amount to cumulatively to about 12% of all CBI labeled green bonds. Our issues range from government bodies, government-backed entities, municipalities, banks, non-financial corporates, and local government, and some sovereigns. So I wanted to tell you a little bit more about what's happening next week. As Sean touched on, we are actually launching the new standard on the 13th of this month. This is a very exciting opportunity for us to expand what we can offer, the services we can offer. As the green bond market has now matured, it is time to move on to the other types of instruments that have been described by the previous speakers, sustainability-linked instruments, and very importantly, entity certification. So we're actually offering the option to a company or a group of companies to certify, which offers greater flexibility for issuing general purpose debt that can be certified under the standard. So we recognize that this transformation by companies, as has been touched on before, has to be inclusive. It has to include all the sectors of the economy. And this is why we have put effort into having a best practice framework for how a company, even a brown company, which is high emitting currently, can transition to net zero by 2050. And in that context, we have also, during 22, we have developed sector-specific criteria for 4 high-emitting sectors, specifically cement, steel, chemicals, and hydrogen production. And with this, I think I will move on to the next slide. Apologies if this slide is very busy. I will just touch on a few things on the slide, just to say really that what you see now is an overview of the taxonomy. This taxonomy is used for 2 purposes. It's used for screening labeled bonds based on publicly available information, This is what we call the Green Bond Database. But underlying each subsector, we do have specific criteria that we can use for certification. The last two columns of the table indicate the sectors for which we can certify companies. There are specific criteria for companies, different to use of proceeds instruments. And as the four sectors, what we call the transition sectors, have been developed recently in view of the entity certification criteria in mind, we have full ability to certify projects in companies with activities in those sectors. Some sectors, I would like to say, do not actually require a transition path towards net zero, specifically solar, wind, and other near zero sectors, but the bulk of the sectors do actually require a transition plan. We already have a transition plan embedded in some of our sectors, such as shipping and buildings, which mainly address operational efficiency. And this, I will not go into too much detail, is just to give you an overview of what additional criteria we're applying when we're certifying a whole company as opposed to just a use of proceeds instrument. So as you see, this goes further towards the governance aspect of the company and the target setting process. You may have heard that there is a lot of skepticism about the ambition of some of these sustainability-linked bonds and the credibility and whether they're just being used as a tool for greenwashing. So this is what we're trying to address and tackle. So the ambition in the case of a climate bond certified company would be actually defined within the specific sector that the company operates in. So basically we require a company to disaggregate its operations either by way of revenues or by way of emissions. And then we assess each disaggregated part against the specific target which is included in the sector criteria documents that I have described. So to achieve the transition and to support the plan of action, we require obviously strategic objective, a strategic narrative, a vision generated at the top obviously of the company, and then an implementation plan to go with it. So action plans, milestones, financial and operational metrics, detailed finance plans that support it and make it feasible, internal controls, internal policies, and sensitivity analysis to support the viability of these plans. Governance is very important. We require both the governance framework to be strong and there be clear disclosure of the governance processes in place. So disclosure is key, and this is what any company wishing to transition and certify is also very keen to disclose their green plans. I should say also that because currently, as you have seen from the previous slide, we don't cover the whole taxonomy yet, although we're expanding our sector criteria. So we are allowing a group of companies to choose a boundary which is not at the top of the parent company level. So we can certify a whole group of companies if the activities are largely eligible, or we can certify a subsidiary, number of subsidiaries, or even part of a company, so long as the boundary can be clearly indicated and reported on. Alignment with our criteria requires at least 90% alignment. So we have a 10% flexibility within the certified entity to cater for sectors that we do not actually yet have developed criteria for. I would also like to say that for the part of the entity that we have left out of the boundary because we don't have criteria for, we do actually have very important safeguards and conditions. The safeguards relate to no entity, no part of the parent group engaging in fossil fuel exploration, extraction, or power generation from fossil fuels, no deforestation activities, and very importantly, the parent group to have a public commitment to net zero by 2050. And one final slide just to show that, firstly, we don't expect companies to decarbonize on a linear or a gradual basis. Usually, decarbonization is staggered. The line here, the curve here indicates a trajectory in any particular sector. It could be the emissions intensity of cement manufacturing, for example. We will be able to certify, obviously, any company that is under the curve, either company X, which would be a near zero company, say a solar or wind company, and this company would carry an aligned with 1.5 degrees label. We will be able to certify the companies which are best in class in their respective sectors. So company Y, again, is below the curve. So again, it's aligned. But we also want to provide certification to companies which are not yet on the curve, like company Z. And to indicate the difference, then we have a transition label for these companies. A condition, of course, would be that the decarbonization plan would need to get them to at least on the pathway by 2030. So these are more ambitious, highly decarbonizing entities. And of course, when they move from this point to this point, then they will change the label from transition to aligned. So just want to finish by saying that with the launch of the standard on the 13th, there will be a webinar online, which you may be interested in attending, and the standard, the guidance, and a lot of other marketing document will also be available on our website if you want to refer to it, and I will be very happy to answer any questions offline following this event about version 4 of our scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Please stay to answer questions. Are there any questions from the floor? Yes, please. 1 minute to get the microphone.
Thank you. So you've mentioned just a couple of the benefits of certification versus without. Could we, hear a little bit more about it? Because, as you've mentioned, the benefits of issuing certified bonds are much bigger than any drawbacks. Thank you.
Yes. So as you have seen, certification actually requires 2 levels of independent reviews. So the first level is the independent verifier. The verifier cannot be connected to the issuer in any way. Plus, we are independent to both the verifier and the issuer. So this adds an additional level of oversight. In addition to that, we have our Climate Bond Standards Board who monitor everything we do and the standards that come out. So this is what we would call a best practice standard. And in fact, the EU Green Bond Standard is similar in many respects. Sean and his team at the time have had input to the development of the EU Green Bond Standard. So our taxonomy is not exactly the same as the EU taxonomy. There are some differences and, of course, many similarities, and we do hope to achieve interoperability for some sectors going forward. It is a label that is valued by investors because they can do less research on their bonds if they carry the certification label, which is why most certifications happen pre-issuance, because the issuers want to take advantage of this reputational benefit of having a certified bond. I don't know if the person from Terna Energy was here to confirm that, but we cannot prove an additional price benefit of certified versus a green because the sample is not substantial. to compare like with like. But yes, anecdotally, because as I said before, a lot of our issuers are programmatic in the framework I showed you before. They are repeat issuers because they continue to see the benefits of certification.
No other question. I'd like to thank Marina.
Thank you.
And please have a seat. We go to our next speaker, who is Maria Thanasopoulou. She is the head of unit at Energy Markets and Regulation at the Exergia consulting company, very well-known energy consulting company. So Maria will speak from her seat. Okay, you can go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I would like to thank also INA and Mr. Stambolis for inviting us. Today I would like to make an introduction on blue finance, which is a new concept and a new area in climate finance. It is actually a subset of green bonds, and it is dealt within the green universe so far. In order to support blue economy, which is the sustainable use of ocean resources. And the truth is that it is a moral imperative to protect the oceans, but it is also a growing financial opportunity since the blue economy is expected to double until 2030 to $3 trillion USD. The traditional sectors in blue economy are fisheries and aquaculture, coastal tourism, shipping, ports, offshore renewables, marine ecosystem restoration, plastics recycling, and marine biotechnology. So blue economy is the new green, as we say. It all started in 2018 when the first sovereign blue bond by Seychelles government was issued. At that time, the government was supported by World Bank. Since then, World Bank issued ProBlue, which is an initiative, an umbrella program for supporting coastal and marine resources around the world. After that, in the same year, we had the United Nations Environmental Program, which issued the Blue Economy Sustainable Finance Principles, a voluntary framework. The European Investment Bank with the two development banks of Germany and France, AFD and KfW, launched the Clean Oceans Initiative in 2018, and in the next year, the European Investment Bank also launched the Blue Sustainable Ocean Strategy. So within these two initiatives, the European Investment Bank actually supports green shipping, sustainable seafood production, marine renewables, and plastics recycling. Other important initiatives were the issuance by Nordic Investment Bank of the first Nordic Blue Bond in 2019, and they have issued more since then. The objective was to combat the Baltic Sea eutrophication from the industrial wastewater. We had the next year the Bank of China, which issued the blue bonds and green bonds supporting actually marine renewables and wastewater, so green investments that had inherently a component of blue. Then in 2021, we had the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, which issued the Blue Bond Incubator, supporting corporate and sovereign blue bonds in Asia and Pacific. And in 2022, in our region, EU, EBRD, and the Union for Mediterranean launched the Blue Finance Vehicle to promote blue economy in the next years. So blue bonds is a very small fragment of the green universe so far, but it has a lot of momentum. Since 2018, we had 26 blue bonds, and the total value is of $5 billion USD. As you can see, there is a rise in 2022 from 5 bonds to 11. Blue bonds, similarly to green bonds, can be issued by corporates, like, for example, Seaspan, which is a shipping management company, or Movi, which is a seafood production plant in Norway. They can be issued by IFIs like World Bank, IFC. They can also be issued by governments, either local like municipalities or sovereign. They can also be issued by banks like Nordic Baltic Bank. We have so far the green bond principles. They were issued in 2014 and in the latest version in 2021. They acknowledge the fact that there are blue bonds and they can be supported within their framework as long as they comply with the four principles, the use of proceeds, monitoring, management, supervision. The Asia Development Bank also extended their green bonds framework to support ocean economy through their blue bonds framework. They are again in compliance with ICMA's green bond principles. The climate bond standard also has investments that are in line with the blue universe, like in the water sector, in wastewater treatment, for industrial sector also marine renewables. And finally, in 2022, we had from IFC a first of its kind taxonomy for blue bonds, which is based on the ICMA principles. IFC is a sister company of World Bank, and they are they are in the executive committee of ICMA's board. And they have published this taxonomy, which is more of an eligibility framework of what can be considered blue. They are supporting Sustainable Development Goals of 6, which is the water management and water sanitation, and Sustainable Development Goal 14, which refers to the oceans and has to do with ocean-friendly and water-friendly products, plastics recycling, sustainable shipping, marine ecosystem restoration, sustainable tourism, offshore renewables. Now, the IFC has been working on blue finance already since 2020, when they gave the first loan to Indorama company in Thailand in order to increase the recycling capacity of the company and divert plastics from oceans and from landfills. Since then, they have given loans to commercial banks like in Thailand, where the blue economy is approximately 30% of their GDP. In Philippines to BDO Bank, in Banco Internacional in Ecuador, and recently we had also a blue loan to Banca Transilvania in Romania from IFC. They support investments in line with their taxonomy, mostly focused on compliance with the Urban Water Framework Directive of the European Union. Other than that, they are working with corporations like with Sabesp in Brazil, which is a water supply and sanitation company, and Yapı Kredi, which is a leasing company in Turkey. So we have been tasked by IFC to implement several blue finance market studies across the countries that you can see here. So we have Africa on the right hand, and on the left we have European countries, MCT countries, Central Eastern Europe. And the focus was to identify blue finance commercial lending opportunities for banks that are market ready, mostly focused on the private sector, but also on the public for municipalities. The findings were that there are a lot of opportunities, especially in SDG 6, and these range from water supply and sanitation for improved wastewater treatment and water-saving technologies for industries, like in textile, in food and beverage industry, in automotive in Turkey, for example. We have seen depending on the country, opportunities related to rainwater harvesting, for instance. This was very relevant in Africa, where there was huge water scarcity, and every user is competing with the others for the availability of the water. The way we worked is that we identified several triggers for blue finance, which have to do with regulation. So in Europe, we have the Urban Water Framework Directive. The EU taxonomy is also a driver. We have the circular economy, Green Deal. All these are constituting also some trigger for blue finance. The countries that are in accession and that have some connection to Europe, like in Turkey, who have already not transposed, but they have a Green Deal in their country, also showed significant investments in all the taxonomy sectors. Other issues are the pollution, like in Danube, like the pollution of the Danube or the Marmara oil spillage. New technologies like vertical farming, and also, depending on the country, we looked into what are the profitable business segments that could have a meaningful impact on SDG 6 and SDG 14. And proposed investments for these sectors. It was very surprising that there are many banks that are already doing blue finance and they didn't know it, like in South Africa, like Nedbank, who was providing loans to recycling companies and to farmers for water savings, like drip irrigation, shade netting. Generally, I would like to conclude that the Blue Universe will have a momentum in the next years. It will build on the track record of the green finance, and there is a lot of potential for the protection of the ocean. Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you, Maria. Very interesting aspect of sustainable bonds. Obviously, closely related, but yet different from the green bonds, and that's something that we will need to discuss to throw a little more light. We now come to the end. As I said, my colleague Kostas Theophylaktos, unfortunately, he had to leave, so he left in his presentation, but I do not intend to go through this because we have covered most topics. What I'd like to do, though, is to make some observations based on one slide of his presentation. That, who can issue the green bond. The climate bond sector criteria are very important. I cannot find the slide, sorry. What this slide was telling us was the bonds that have been issued in the region, and it's very declining in the sense of we start with a lot of activity in main European countries, USA, etc., going down, and no country in our region appears at all in this slide. So the reason is because very few bonds have been issued, as you've seen here. We had all the bonds, and the bond issuers, the main bond issuers were here except PPC, which anyway is not a green bond issuer, sustainable bond. And the reason is that the market is still shallow. People are not well informed. Companies are hesitant. Banks have the ability and they have the liquidity to support this, but they prefer to go to more conventional type of financing. Now, from our side, we intend to change that. And we intend to change that by entering the market as we have entered now in a very conventional way, doing presentations, company-to-company presentations, closed meetings, webinars, conferences such as this one and the one we organized last year on ESG criteria, and getting outside, moving to the companies, visiting them, giving them a lot of information on what they can do with climate bonds. And the fact that the agenda is broadening, for example, we now have financing of grids and electricity interconnectors and so forth. This will help us a lot more in approaching major companies like the distribution operators, grid operators in a region. And rather than waiting for them to come to us and say, can you help us with a green bond, we're going to them and say, look, these are your financing needs over the next 10 years, according to your 10-year plan. Most of them have 10-year plans. And this is how the issuance of a green bond can help move your company forward. And at the same time, make your company stand out in terms of being recognized as a leader in this area of finance. So we're going to take a very proactive approach based on the current experience and information, and of course all the CBI data and analysis, which is very extremely useful to us, and at the same time encouraging and promoting public dialogue on these issues. This is the weak point, we think, at this stage, as far as the region is concerned, not only Greece, but all the countries in the area. And I'll just show you, these are the countries which we cover. The blue ones are the countries which we follow from a statistical point of view and analysis, and the green ones are the peripheral countries. So our main area of operation, as we see it, as far as green bonds are concerned, is the core countries we follow. And this is where we are going to take this very proactive approach over the next few months. So developing a roadshow, this is something else we're considering, like we have been marketing our flagship publications like the Southwest Europe Energy Outlook. In the same vein, we can develop a roadshow for promoting green bonds. And we're going to do this in association with the local energy exchanges and with the local chambers of commerce, because our experience today shows that they are very open to such an approach. They're very eager to support. They're very eager to inform their members. And they are very good focal points because they concentrate, they have the major companies around them, the various electricity power exchanges in the region, and the chambers of commerce. So this is what we are thinking and planning ahead. And I found this today, this meeting, this gathering, especially Sean Kidney's presence here among us, and the time he took to be here with us today, very valuable and very encouraging. So I'd like to thank you again, Sean, for coming here. So, any questions? Not only these presentations we had, first, of course, primarily on the presentations we had, but also for the talks we had this morning. Are there any questions or observations or ideas or suggestions?
Who's got a deal that we can bring to the market? That's what I want.
So, unless Sean would like to say a few closing remarks?
Let me just say.
Right.
Thank you, Kostas, for arranging this. Thanks a bit for everyone for coming. It's a privilege and honour to be here. I just want to say, above all, for all of us, it's a privilege of honour for what we're going to do in the next few years. You all know the problem. You all know the challenge. It is not an easy path, but if we take this path of change, we will see a new economic boom. We will see reduced cost of energy. We will see extraordinary investments in infrastructure, which we know creates jobs, and we will see a future for ourselves and above all for our children. That's the prize. Thank you for being part of this journey.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. What we're going to do over the next few days, we're going to have on our microsite all the presentations, and on the YouTube, we're going to have the visual of the pictures and the video. So you will receive notification through your email and with all the coordinates, so you'll be able to access both the microsite and the YouTube, and you'll have a better idea of what transpired today. So thank you all. Thank you especially the speakers and panelists. And please join us for a light lunch right here in this room. Thank you again.